I mean, I'm not a social person. You're much more social than I am. I'm not. I would quite happily just shut the doors if my wife wasn't around. God forbid anything ever happens to her. I'll be that old weirdo that lives in that house with the blinds never open, and he's seen shuffling around the town getting his shopping and then goes home. You know, and that'll be my life, because I don't really understand. I understand people from an intellectual point of view and to a certain extent from a spiritual point of view, but from the practical point of view of being in a room with people, quite often I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
I just don't know the dynamic. I can't keep up with it. There was a time when I could, but there was a time when the only way that I could be in a group of people happily was when, I think we've talked about this before, I'm getting deja vu about talking about this, but is when I'd invited everybody round and I'd sorted everything out and it was in my space, and I would kind of hold court. You know, I would be the guy who was putting the music on. I would decide what films we were going to watch, if we're going to watch a film, or, you know, and that I was comfortable with that. But even then, there were things happened at those gatherings where, you know, I didn't know what was going on. I have a history of that, a history of just not understanding what's going on in the room. You know, it's weird.
But you know, I think because we don't know each other beyond this interaction at this point in our lives, I hope that changes at some point. I really do hope we get to hang out together at least once or more.
Yeah.
But I think you and I are more alike than you realize, because what you described there, you described me. You know, like that's always been my social. Like, I don't go to parties. If there's a party happening, I'm the one having it, because I decided to invite people to my house.
Yeah.
And outside of being a musician and going to concerts, my social life is restricted to conversations like my social life is like what I'm having with you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the way I am. And I would have no problem shutting the doors as long as I could eat and I had music. You know, I would have no problem leaving the house. My wife is the reason I do anything. And like you said, if she was gone, I'm pretty sure it would be, I'd turn into Sid Barrett. You know, it would be, you know, which is not a problem to me. I don't see that as a problem. I see that as being productive. You know, I would get a lot more done.
But Sid wasn't, no, you would never turn into Sid Barrett. That's a bad example.
Oh, well, it is. I meant socially Sid Barrett. Like, I'd be the guy that doesn't leave his house.
Yeah, withdrawn. You know? Yes. I think that's a common theme that I'm seeing emerging for all ages of men.
Yep.
I think young men are feeling that as well. They're feeling that the world now belongs to young, beautiful women. They are the ones who are being, you know, they're in all our media now. You know, all of the heroes are feminine. All of the sort of testosterone-driven, chisel-jawed heroes that I had growing up, you know, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Stallone, these Clint Eastwood, these kind of people, these stoic heroes. There are none. They don't make that kind of story anymore for young men, and I think that's leading to a drop in population. Because the young men don't have those archetypes to draw upon, you know, so they feel that there's something toxic about the way they feel, which I think is it might be. I mean, it's very easy to paint that as a dystopian thing and to think, you know, that's the end of everything. But I think it's maybe a phase we have to go through, because we do need to figure out things about what we are and all that kind of thing, and that kind of the tipping of the scales. It doesn't seem as we can ever get balance. The scales seem to tip one direction then the other direction, and I just wonder, you know, as cities evolve and as social things evolve, will we get to a stage where we find the balance? But at the moment, the balance is sort of tipped in a different direction. Certainly in the English-speaking world. I mean, it might be different other places. I don't know so much about them, but certainly as far as the English-speaking media goes, it's all young, virile women that are the heroes, the heroes now. So it's a change.
It is, and it's funny. I've thought about that a lot recently too, and about how the person I grew up being, whether it was a product of this emerging consciousness that's happening, we're seeing now, or if it was just my own lot in life, but my youthful version of who I was would do really well now, because the way I see it, like I was very socially awkward when I was a kid. I was often the class clown because of it was the way I coped with rejection. I think was like I could make people laugh, but I couldn't make them smile. I couldn't make them love me, and so I gained notoriety or appreciation or respect by being the weirdo, and eventually I just became the weirdo. Whether that was, I don't know if it's a chicken and egg thing, but my relationship with women has always been very strained, and if I met a girl I liked, I would spend months and months anticipating how I would tell her that, and I never would.
Yeah, I was the same. Yes.
And
that's a common.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle I ever like when I met Megan. I was like 19 or 20. It was very early on in my romantic life. Like I didn't even lose my virginity until I was like 18 or 19.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of thing. Right. And so it was like she came along very shortly after that. It's so I was lucky to make that connection. Like I think there was if you were going to go and look at alternate realities of Chris, there's gonna be a lot of them that I'm alone. I think.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm shortchanging myself, but I hear, like, for example, I was watching a video on YouTube. I forget who it was, but it was like someone interviewing Gen Z, or like a teenager, and asking them, like, what is it like? What's appropriate for a boy? Like, if a boy likes you, like, how does that work out? And she's like, well, he can't tell me. Like, if a boy comes up to me and says, I find you attractive, that's a predator. You don't deal with that guy. And I'm thinking, like, wow, so like I would have been considered the real deal back now. I'd be like a gentleman who would never tell a woman what he thought, only just existed until a woman picked me out of the crowd,
Right.
And whether or not I got picked, maybe it would still be the same. I maybe wouldn't have got picked, but I think my personality and my fear of engaging women and rejection and everything like that would have gone farther for me now as a youth than it did when back in the 90s and the early aughts, but that's just my perception of it, and we can all twist those things that way. But and I'm not saying it's a good thing. I think I suffered horrible social anxiety when it came to just wanting a mate. Like I remember growing up and being like in my late teens, all I would think about is how could I get so and so to like me, and there could have been any dozen of women I would have accepted as a mate.
Yeah.
Because for whatever reason, right? And it was any small thing. Like if I look at them and analyze them now, none of them were suitable for me. They weren't smart enough. They weren't adventurous enough. They weren't respectful enough.
Yeah.
Right. But if they were willing to say, like, yes, I'll dance with you. Yes, I'll go to that party with you, but they, I didn't have the nerve to do it. And the few times I did, I got rejected, so that would just add another nail in the coffin,
Yeah. Yeah.
And, so I identified with guys like Stephen Wilson easier, right? Because half of his songs back then were about how, like, women wouldn't call him back and women don't love him. And,
yes.
And I understood all that. I didn't like the love song. I liked the heartbreak song for that reason, probably too, because I live in those feelings,
Yeah.
So when I see that happening now, I'm wondering was I just one of the first victims of that mindset where men were being like toxic masculinity was being forced upon us. Like you don't deserve to talk to that woman. How dare you tell her that you feel attracted to her? You creep.
Yeah.
And it's like,
well, I don't know. I mean, it may be because you're you're a generation behind me, as it were. So, but the same sort of thing happened to me. So I think it's a personal thing for me anyway. There was no. Gosh, it's so long. It's so long ago. I'm trying to think, but there were a couple of girls that I liked at school, but the problem then was that they were grown-ups, and I wasn't. And they used to make fun of the boys because the boys were so obviously drooling at the prospect of anything to do with women. It was because. You couldn't even. This is perhaps venturing into difficult territory, but I would think nowadays there can be no man, no boy who hasn't watched porn, who hasn't seen what a woman looks like, even if it's completely unrealistic, right? But when I was a lad, I didn't know what a woman looked like. I had never seen a naked woman when I was lusting after them. I didn't know how it worked. There was no sex education that made any sense. There was no way to know what was going on. That was in the 70s. So it was all a complete mystery. Yet you had these raging hormones, sort of driving you towards stuff, and the girls could see that a mile off because they had matured. They were now young women, whereas we were still going through the change. So it was all very awkward. And there's a good example of how I just didn't understand things. I didn't understand what was going on. So there was a girl I quite liked. And I used to walk by her house, on thinking maybe she'll come out and we can just meet one another by chance, but she never did. And there was another girl called Rosemary. I made an album called Rosemary in her sort of memory, and I tell the story of what it was like. And Rosemary was we were in 5th year or 6th year, must have been 6th year, so we'd be 16. So you could learn to drive. So Rosemary was driving. She had a little van that she drove. And my friend Michael, who I'm still best friends with, were walking home from school one day, and Rosemary pulled up next to us and offered us a lift. And we got in, and Michael and I were still kids, really. And we were laughing and joking with one another to Rosemary's excluding her from all our conversation, just being stupid little boys. And I can still remember the look of disappointment on her face. And now I realise she was picking me up because she was interested in me. But it's taken me decades to even realise that. So there was that kind of whole sort of, I just didn't know what was going on half the time. I really didn't. And there were incidents later to do with women and blokes, that where I had to thinking about it in the years after, it kind of comes to me, oh, that's why he looked like that. That's why she was saying, oh, fuck me. I never got it at the time. And that's so many incidents like that. So when I met Ali, it was different. It was like, she was very young when I met her, and I was 22, she was 17 when we met. But there was just an instant sort of ease, and that was such a relief to be with somebody that I didn't feel, any anxiety with. Whereas a lot of the girls that I'd had my eye on up to them, they made me feel anxious. The one girl in particular, I won't bother telling that story, but they made me feel like I don't know what's going on here. I don't know how this is going to go. This is weird. But with Ali, it was just like, it was instantly, it was literally love at first sight. I first saw her. I'd been to her house and I hadn't even seen her because we had a mutual. Her uncle was the guy who introduced us, but I knew her uncle John, and I was looking for a bit of furniture, and his sister, my wife's mother, was where I went to get the bit of furniture. And Ali saw me through the curtains of her bedroom. She saw me through the curtains, and she says that she told her family right then that she was going to marry me. Now this is a girl of probably 16 then, because I remember going to her 17th birthday party. That was when we first sort of met. But she said then, I'm going to marry that guy, because she'd heard that I liked craft work. Her Uncle John had impressed Ali because Uncle John was able to say, oh, I've got a friend that likes craft work too. And she said, who's that? And she told that's this guy. And so Ali's radar was her radar were going. So I was doing some acting at that point in the sort of local sort of theatre, and I was in a play with Uncle John, and Uncle John said, and again I had no idea what was going on, but he was setting me up. I had no idea that's what he was doing, but he was. And he said, oh, my niece is here. And I went, oh right, where is she? And he said, she's sitting up at the back there. So I parted the curtains of the stage and looked through and went, oh. that was my first sight of Alison. So she saw me through the curtains, and I saw her through a different kind of curtain. But I said to John, I said, that's your niece? Because John was not a very handsome guy, so this, okay, you've got a beautiful niece, great. And but it was instant, like, sort of, oh yeah, there's that weird thing that happens which you can't explain, It goes beyond lust, because there's a lot of lust when you're young. There's a lot of, oh wow, I really, really like that girl, but this was something else. This was something. I don't know if there's a sort of prescience there where you think, oh, that's the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. But it's almost as if there is. There's a kind of gravity pulling you in that direction. I don't know if you feel that, or.
Well, yeah, me and Megan have had a little more of a fractured relationship. We broke up a couple times and spent years apart at points, But I did feel that way about her when I first met her, and I still feel that way about her now, And I feel differently about her than I ever have, And our fondness for each other grows in different ways as we get older, and I can't, sometimes I think about, what would have happened if I had the nerve to talk to this girl or that girl, because I found there was a handful of girls I liked a lot that I found out years later or shortly after at certain points that if I'd been honest with them, we would have been together, but I wouldn't have. They were waiting for me because it was the man's job, and it was, and I wasn't the man enough to do it. But so I often think like, what would it be like, but I still can't imagine myself with anybody but Megan, because I she's a rock for me, and she has this certain, like, I don't know, like she looks up to me in a way that I feel like she will go along with anything I desire. As far as if I decide we want to pick up and move to Nova Scotia, she goes, okay, I'll find us a house, like it's, and it's, and if I say I don't want to get the COVID shot, she goes, okay, and neither will I, like I'll stand with you on this one, and whether she disagrees or agrees, I think she looks to me for the information. She knows I have the encyclopedic mind, that I'm hungry for information, right? So, she might be reading a fiction and I'm reading a scientific journal, and then she'll take my knowledge as truth, and that to me, that's so valuable. Like that's, especially when you're raising a child, right? Like with somebody who that's her values are unwavering, going to align with mine because she trusts me, and I think, I think she sees that value too, that her life is exponentially better because I'm strong-willed and I'm determined, and I took her along for the ride, and and that's great to have, as a partner, that to have.
That's the sort of dynamic that we don't really see in the stories we tell ourselves, certainly in our movies and TV shows. It seems to have changed. But do you get the sense that narrative with the, if you like, the guy deciding the direction, because that's the way my dad is. My dad is like, it's his way or the highway sort of thing. There's never been any accommodation for anybody else. He is very much the alpha male for his whole group. He'd be that guy, and that was a traditional way of sort of being, that there would be, certainly within the family, the patriarchy was very strong. And it's not to say that there couldn't be matriarchs, because there are all kinds of dynamics going on. But do you get a sense that that's a narrative or a circumstance that persists even though our narratives don't reflect it? Do you know what I mean?
I think it's unique to every situation too. Like my friend John has a phrase that he uses all the time. He says there's a lid for every pot, and
okay.
So I think if a guy needs that, that's the woman he's going to end up with. If he's honest with himself. Of course.
Yeah. So it's like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that fit together. There are lots of pieces that will fit together, but there's one that fits. And that's the one that you kind of find. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, so yeah, you're probably right. It's probably not a good idea to place too much emphasis on the narratives that we tell ourselves, because reality is very much more nuanced and different than that. And the narratives are there to provide. I think they're there to provide us with a reflection of what we are or what we are becoming, and the idea that the patriarchy is going away and the matriarchy is asserting itself is probably, it might be something that lasts and has an effect over time, but it might be something that goes away just as quickly, because a lot of things, the world is changing really fast. That's another thing that that being old is difficult to deal with. Like, you're just getting your head around one thing, and then some fucking other thing happens, and you're like, what? Really? I don't know, where is this coming from? If you don't know, if you're disconnected from it, you don't know what the fuck is happening. I learned recently that, according to one poll, most people think that using a mobile phone in public is a bad idea, or that yes, we're likely to have a nuclear war within the next sort of 5 years. And so, where are these ideas must be getting planted in people's heads, because you would never have had those ideas unless they were, and what. So people are changing all the time, and the times are changing all the time, and I think I just need to give up on it, basically. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of it is perception too, and it's a narrative, like you said. But I think the truth comes out when reality starts to set in. Like every woman I know. I shouldn't say every woman I know, but like, say if I think of any women I know, and if they were to believe that matriarchy is the way, and the women are like the end all be all, and we're just useless sperm producers, they're like that till the plumbing stops working or the lights don't turn on.
Exactly. Right? Yes. I think that's...
And then all of it. So, and I think it's a yin and yang thing again. Like, just like how Megan makes me a better person, and I think I make her a better person.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of that is that surrendering to your natural tendencies, right? Mm-hmm. Like Megan, like watching Megan become a mom has opened my eyes to a lot again about the reality of the yin and yang of men and women, because we're going to talk about marijuana maybe in a bit here too, because I quit marijuana for a while and got back into it shortly before Mackenzie was born, not because of Mackenzie, but because it was New Year's Eve and I wanted to get stoned, and I did, and then the next thing you know, 2 weeks, and then a couple weeks later Jeff Beck died, and I wanted to get stoned and listen to a Jeff Beck record. And then next thing you know, it was like every night I was smoking weed again, and then it was becoming more of a habit. And then when Mackenzie was born, I found the marijuana was a wonderful aid for dealing with late night feedings, and because for the first 5 weeks I took work off, so me and Megan split the duties, because not to get too personal, but Megan's unable to produce breast milk, so formula was the only way we could feed Mackenzie, and so we took turns. Like every feeding, we would go back and forth. So none of us, we weren't getting any real sleep. And Megan, her and I would be fighting a lot because we're already, wit's end with the lack of sleep. But Mackenzie could do no wrong with Megan. Megan could nurture a screaming baby for hours without any problem.
Yeah.
Whereas I get 2 minutes into it, I'm trying not to shake the baby. Right?
I know. There's all those horrible thoughts that go through your mind. Just shut up! Will you just shut up? But yeah.
And I found the marijuana was a big gloss. I could just gloss over that. It'd like lower the testosterone spikes down a bit, right?
Yeah.
And so that I'm watching that and realizing, because my wife is not a patient person. Like, I'm the patient one in the relationship, right? Like if we're in public and something's pissing my wife off, I have to grab her and say no, like a dog, like do not, like this is not the time or place. Nothing is going to be gained from you telling that person what you think.
Yes, that rings a bell. That's the same. That's the same for me and Ali. Ali's the one that will lose the rag. Yeah. And as she gets older, she gets better at controlling herself in those situations. Mm-hmm. And again, I feel like an asshole for saying that. I feel like a misogynist only because society makes me think this way. Yeah.